This is the Superpowered Mind podcast for inquiring individuals who are tired of the struggle for peace, happiness, and clarity. I'm Claire Diamond, ready to help you explore the principles of the mind, the self, and reality to unlock ultimate mental freedom. This podcast is the one to listen to if you're ready to experience the capabilities of the superpowered mind. Hi, everybody. Today we are looking at self-esteem and why it is the end of self-reference. And this flies in the face of what the entire self-help industry is telling us, because from what we read and hear, self-esteem comes from a real focus on me and my confidence and my sense of being and my understanding of my values and my worth and my purpose in life and what I contribute. And so it looks like to have high self-esteem, to have a strong sense of self, it looks like everything has to be focused in on that self. It has to be developed. It has to have attention. It has to be something. But actually, and this is what we look at in every single one of my courses, the highest self-esteem is two things, really. First of all, it is the end of the attempt to build up that idea of ourselves as separate. And in fact, it is the recognition that every single interaction, every relationship, every project is saying, you are not separate. And secondly, it is the very humble, very open, from full accountability, recognition of our behavior and the harm it causes, and how any desire to change the world, change other people, must first of all start with our own issues, our own problems, our own confusion. So let's look at both. So the first one, high self-esteem, is the absence of self-reference, self-focus, the absence of separation. This is because the idea of what we are is a creation from within. So all of the content of what I think I am is coming from beliefs that have been acquired, from conditioning, from all the meanings and associations with this idea of self, with the idea of me as the decider and the doer. And that is a creation of mind, isn't it? It's a psychological creation. It doesn't exist anywhere else. It doesn't exist outside of the lived experience of it. So it's inherently fragile. It's made of thought. It's made of belief. And actually, it's made of insanity. It's made of total confusion of beliefs being real. And it's made of complete illogic, that the conscious mind, that the idea of what I am is in control of anything ever, that it even exists as an entity. And so that inherently illogical, fragile, transient, insubstantial, imagined entity is what is trying to be secured when we try to secure the self, when we try to feel like we are someone, like we matter, like we're important. That's the thing that is trying to be fixed in place. And it literally can't be. In fact, the more attention that is put into it, the more energy and focus there is on securing that idea of what we think we are, the further away the entire body-mind system comes from living in actual reality. And the more obsessed it becomes with this impossible to achieve aim. One day I'm going to feel like a good person. One day I'm going to feel secure and safe. One day I'm going to have all the right emotions or the right experience. One day everyone's going to think the right things about me. It's literally impossible to achieve. And there's an entire industry, maybe well-meaning, maybe exploitative, around trying around getting people to embark on that impossible to achieve mission. So really what's going on is, in any situation in which there is any form of stress or tension, it's because that self-identity is under threat. And so stress, when it's taken as a signal that, yes, the mind is right, the things need to change here so that I can feel okay, that situation creates more focus on securing the identity and less focus on the meeting, on the world, on the relationship, on the people we're with. Everything starts to become about me. And the protection comes up, defenses come up, all the old beliefs are circulating and ramping up. And it looks just real. It looks like this, this is how the world is. This is how I am. I have to protect myself and put myself forward so that I can be who I want to be. But all that's just insanity. It's total insanity. It feels awful for all of us. And it's the result of complete confusion. And narcissism, which we think is because the individual just, they only think about themselves. And we sort of, it's implied that it's because they think they're so great, they think they're so important, they're all that matters. But narcissism is coming from, yes, an absolute obsession with the self, because it's constantly in survival mode. It's constantly feeling under threat. It's learned that somehow by controlling what other people say, or by speaking a lot, or by getting enough attention, having enough drama, somehow that self-identity will be secured within that. And so this entire self-focus through narcissism makes absolute sense. It's a self-identity under the threat of death, fighting for its life. And that total focus on self plays out to varying degrees in all of us when there is an experience of core identity really being challenged. The things that we most attach our sense of being to, sense of being a separate individual to, whether that's our work, our money, our relationship with our partner, with our kids, with our parents, our house, our football team, our beliefs, our politics, whatever it is, where there is greatest attachment of self to that topic or situation or area of life, is where by necessity we are most narcissistic, which means it's where we're most vulnerable, most in protective mode. And so it's why everything's so backwards, because it looks like we need to build up our self-esteem in these areas. And when that looks like I need to focus more on me, we can see how the whole thing is a vicious circle. More focus on me as a separate entity, more, it is more focus on the shame, the need, the fear, the insecurity. And none of it happening from a questioning place of what is really going on here. Who am I really? So this is a huge area, and we can start to see how self-esteem really is the absence of any thought of me. It's just in the midst of the meeting. It's about what the meeting's about, or it's in the midst of a conversation. It's about the conversation. And none of it whirring back round over and over and over again to this self-reference. So the interesting thing for us, I think, in this conversation now is that this isn't a bypass of my behavior. And it can look like that. When we take the self out of the equation, it can look like, well, there's no one doing this stuff. There's no one controlling it. There's no one responsible for this. So any behavior goes, really, doesn't it? But this is where the fullness, we could say, of a sane mind, of true spiritual maturity can be seen is when there is deep resentment or resistance or anger at someone or a group of people, or a desperation that other people change, or, in the case of powerful leaders, what could be inflicted on other people, all in the name of whatever that leader is believing. This is where it's so critical for this developing understanding to include a absolute accountability for behavior and perception, and to operate from the basis that everything is a mirror. The whole of reality, that everything, the way everything appears, is a mirror reflecting back the insanity of separation, reflecting back the fact that there is no separate doing, choosing entity as a self and no other. Without this, what happens is that the ego, which is so fragile, so continually vigilant of any threat to it, has a complete get-out clause to avoid any criticism, any confrontation, any recognition of its own behaviors as being problematic. Any recognition really of it being the center of the universe in which everything appears. So the ego, the identity, has such a get-out clause to avoid any hard look at behavior and perception that is happening here. But from this conversation, this understanding, that is the origin of everything. It's the origin of all problems. And so the second element that is so important to consider with self-esteem, and particularly when it comes to people in positions of leadership or power or influence, is to recognize that ultimate self-esteem really is not just the end of self-reference, which can be an escape clause for anything goes from my behavior. It is also the openness to all information about the perception and about the behavior here until that becomes fully aligned with the actual truth of being, which is wholeness, which is unconditional love, which is pure intelligence in action. And this is ultimate humility. And self-esteem, really, the most sane self-esteem, is the recognition of no doer, no individual self to secure, and ongoing attention and openness to wherever there's resistance and resentment and what that is saying about what needs to be healed here, about where there's confusion here. It's the end of putting blame out into the world for the way that we feel. It's the end of trying to change other people in order that we feel better. And that really, it's subtle, and they look like they're two opposing areas almost. But when a spiritual journey encompasses both directions, the end of separation and absolute 100% impersonal accountability for everything, then that really is a body mind that is operating from the greatest truth, from ongoing deepening alignment, from a recognition of the whole way the world and reality is organized, is continual information back into that system about what's being believed, what's being resisted. And that is self-esteem. And it's nothing like what we read about in books about building up confidence and building up our sense of who we are as distinguishing ourselves from other people. So it starts to become clear that true self-esteem is the opening up to the recognition that the purpose of life really is the ending of that narrative of self-separation, because it's not true. It has no substance to it. There's no sanity in it. And at the same time, through that openness, a absolute accountability for behavior and perception that begins here and which dictates how the entire world appears. So it's very different from what we might think of as self-esteem. It has nothing to do with separation, nothing really to do with an individual self, and everything to do with a mind and body aligning to the truth of no separation. Yes, thank you. Lots of love. Bye. Thank you for listening to Superpowered Mind with me, Claire Diamond. If you want extra support in the exploration of your mind, download our exclusive subliminal recording, especially for podcast listeners, on bit.ly/podcast subliminal.